But I ran an interesting experiment where I had a page 100% human and I ran Grammarly against it. Now, what Grammarly does is, I think a lot of people know, is it's very popular and it suggests things that make total sense to do. So I ran Grammarly against it and it came out 94% human. In other words, Grammarly made it back to being perfect again. One of the things I do to make things not appear AI is I put two spaces after every period because in the AI world, they never do that.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Bruce Clay back on the show. Bruce is an internet and digital marketing guru. He's better known as the founding father of search engine optimization and one of the first people to popularize the term. Back in 1996, he started Bruce Clay Inc., an internet marketing solutions company from his house. Today, the company has offices in the US, Europe, Japan, West Asia, and India. His previous episode was about a year ago, episode 425, and we're going to be talking about a lot of awesome, geeky new developments in areas such as AI and all sorts of cool stuff. So, Bruce, it's great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be back.
Yeah, awesome. So, let's talk about AI, and how it's changing the SEO game and some of the things that you're doing with SEO and AI in combination, of course, within Google's guidelines to really do some cool things.
Right. It's interesting when I think back on what it was like when AI really became mainstream, more or less, through ChatGPT. The part that was the most interesting is that it struck me that it was very similar to the beginning days of SEO. That there was a lot of what is this and what can I do with it and experimenting and trying and doing things that had not been done before and learning, and it was a puzzle. And that's what I liked about SEO. It was a puzzle. So back then, I just almost overnight became addicted to it. But I was focused on it as a tool, not a solution. That's one of my sayings. It is a tool, not a solution. And how could it be used to improve productivity or knowledge or help people in the SEO space? Because that was my primary focus at the time. I started with ChatGPT and I started writing scripts and I wrote more scripts and I wrote more scripts and I was trying to figure out how do you do this? And one of the things I do, by the way, is if I want to figure out how to do this, I ask Chat, how do you do this? And Chat will tell you, right? So, like one of the things I did is I asked Chat for a list of hidden commands that only they know about that controls the flow of the answers, and it told me. It gave me a list of 16 on-off switches. I mean, weird things. And most people don't know the chat doesn't just answer your question, but it can also tell you how to do it. And then I started taking the chat scripts and giving them to chat and say, make it better. And then it's, what does it not do? And then I got to a point where I said, okay, create a document that does this and evaluate the document you just wrote and tell me how you can make it better. And it started doing that. So it became self-diagnostic and it evolved and evolved and evolved. And now I have it in basically a Word document. It's actually a Google Doc, a big Google Doc, and it's over 300 pages of my scripts. And some of them, I just counted it last week. One of the scripts I said, how many steps are in this script? And it said 158. 158 step script. And I figured, well, wait, if it takes you like 3 minutes to run a script, that's like 8 hours of scripts for 158 tasks. And it's like a preposterous amount of time. But when I run that script, it runs in 15 minutes, not 8 hours. So the efficiency of AI was one of the very first things that one would note. And I jumped on it. I just jumped on it. Then I decided, since it is early, it's time to figure out what it actually is. And I'll tell you the problem I think the world kind of has with AI. They look at AI as replacing and not supplementing. See, if I'm a writer, I get to apply art to the written word. I get to do compliance. I get to say, no, I want this paragraph first because in a learning sequence that it's better that this be first, not second, right? And how to improve the overall ability for a reader to learn from what I wrote, not just see the words I wrote. And the big problem that I think originally people were doing is that people were trying to make AI relative to content be the solution. There are some tools out there where they openly say, we will create the content production ready. Whereas my orientation is that this is a tool, and that what you really can do is address blind spots and the creative gaps that people that are writers sometimes go through because they don't have the background experience that matches it. And so I created PreWriter.ai, which is actually a tool for writers. It doesn't threaten writers, it helps writers. And it can do some pretty amazing things. Of course, if you're running 150 scripts, you have plenty of opportunity to get it to improve itself and reword itself. One of the other things about it, though, it AI is detectable. There's a interesting phenomenon where what AI does is it writes and it doesn't really make mistakes. It gets it too right. And it uses filler words sometimes, or it uses phrases that are uncommon just to be unique. And it does things that create a footprint so that AI created content can be detected. That's a big problem. And the very first statement from Google, actually, Google made a statement that it has to be human created. That was actually in their guidelines, and that machine created content was against their guideline.
Yep.
Then they changed it. Now it's content for humans, but it doesn't say content by humans anymore. And by the way, that's a fallacy as well. Here's part of that problem. So to test it, and I inflict pain on myself all the time testing this stuff, I created a document, and it was 50, I think it was 48 or 50% AI when you run it through a tool. So I published it. And it did well. It went up to position in the 30s. Then I took it down, ran it through humanizers. There's a bunch of tools out there to do that, and some of them claim to be great, and they're terrible. But we ran through some humanizers, got it up to our goal was 95% human. We got it up to 100%. I republished it and went to the top 5. So I think that even though Google doesn't have a rule that says don't use I think that it might be um, last among equals if you do. And I think that's a warning to people. I also ran an interesting experiment. I know I'm sort of rambling here, but I ran an interesting experiment where I had a page 100% human, and I ran Grammarly against it. Now, what Grammarly does is, I think a lot of people know, is it's very popular, and it suggests things that make total sense to do. So I ran Grammarly against it, and it came out 94% human. In other words, Grammarly made it back to being perfect again. One of the things I do to make things not appear AI is I put 2 spaces after every period. Because in the AI world, they never do that.
Okay.
If you ask AI to create an outline for you, here's a list of keywords, make an outline. Every item on the outline has 3 bullet points. There's a subject with 3 topics, subject, 3 topics, subject, 3 topics, subject, 3 topics. If that isn't a footprint, I don't know what is, right? So in our tool, I actually wrote in a randomizer that has from 3 to 7 topics randomly. No 2 topics in a row with the same number of subtopics. I mean, you do all this. That's why it's 150 statements, right? 150 prompts. But it comes up with some really, really great things. And again, we are not trying to build a finished product. I think that's a mistake. I think that the artist is the writer, and that we want to empower the writer to do even better at what they do by giving them the research to do it. And that's a significant focus of ours. By the way, there's a byproduct of this whole thing. As I said, I could do the prompts myself and take a full day, or I can run them in 15 minutes. We've been able to take the time to create a blog post from hours by reducing it 50% about. And if you're doing a bunch of them, it's actually more than that. You get a rhythm going. So it's an economic advantage. It's a content advantage because AI doesn't forget to cover things. There's no blind spots. I'll tell you how far we actually went. After you have, we start with keyword research, we build an outline, we write an article, we enhance the article, we boil it back down to an outline. We go all the way up and all the way back down. We boil it up to an outline. We flatten the outline into a keyword list. Then we do Google searches. We find out who the top 10 sites are. We pull all the keywords from their navigation and top of page. We identify those as keywords. We compare them to our keyword list. And then we have an automatic content gap analysis. And then we add their keywords into the outline and regenerate the article. That is very different from somebody walking up to chat and say, give me an article on this keyword. I mean, it's like night and day difference.
How long do you think until SEMrush and Ahrefs provide that kind of functionality? Because they both have keyword gap analysis tools, but they don't do what you just described.
Right. Um, you see, I do it within the context of an article as opposed to related keywords in a keyword list. It's a different approach, but
Yeah, but SEMrush does have a tool that assists you with writing. So I'm just curious if you think that this is uh, a potential threat there, that they're gonna kind of steal your secret sauce.
I don't think so. I have subscribed to a number of the tools out there. We're Ahrefs as well. Um, Ahrefs has an API interface into a humanizer, as an example. Now, that's something I'm looking at using. So, but it doesn't really create a package as comprehensive as what we do. In our package, uh, we write an article and we have the outline that matches the article. And from that, we actually build PowerPoint decks with 500 word scripts per slide. We do persona identification. We do a lot of things that anybody could do. Um, we just do it pretty cheap. But and by the way, it gets expensive if you're using chat. So what we did is we wrote logically a scaffold, a program controlled application that it'll run steps for you. So we don't have to run chat. We could switch to Bing or Google or anybody else. If we want to know who's the top 10 sites, we can just go do our own query and pull it from Google. I mean, we are not dependent on chat doing all the work.
Right.
And we're not putting all our eggs in their basket, because I could switch it to anybody I want within the application in a heartbeat. So, and some applications are going to be better than others, right? This one might be better at writing for humans, but this one's better at doing the research, and this one has a bigger LLM, or you have all these different things that are um, in there, right? What's better at natural language might not be the one that is chat. We don't know, right? But we have written an application to drive our scripts so that we can then logically stay up on them and do whatever changes out there, because that's one of the things we know about SEO. Google changes a dozen times a day. We needed to understand that in an emerging technology, it's going to change. And we had to have the flexibility to change on a dime. So we have the application, we have scripts that do amazing, amazing things. They're really, really pretty important to the writer. And we actually have taught it to even resequence articles so that it's easier to learn from the article. It'll take topics and combine them and move them up in the article so that they're covered earlier, because they're fundamental to some of the later steps. I mean, this is pretty advanced stuff, right? And we had to invent it. And, but we've got all of this in there. And, so we did a soft,
Does it write a writer's brief?
yes,
Okay.
it writes a brief for the writer. And then the writer can go through and pick out what they want, or keep it, or rewrite it, or do whatever. They have all the data. And we build the data as separate files. So, and in fact, we pull quotes. We even create quotes that the author, because you specify an author's name, quotes that the author can put in the article that they should be saying, but nobody's ever said it before, right? So we invent quotes for the author
Okay.
and then give it to them in a separate little area. And there's all sorts of tips and
How about captions? Can it pull stock photography from these free photo sites like Pexels and Unsplash and Pixabay, and then invent a caption to put underneath it so it doesn't look like it's just gratuitous eye candy?
we don't.
Oh, there you go. There's another feature.
Yes. We actually had it at one point creating alt tags, but you really need the image. And so we started doing some work in adding images, and the images, it's still primitive.
Hmm.
I don't like the way that works. And I think maybe in a year it'll be there and we'd be able to recommend those as well. But remember, it's a pre-writer. The writer, I don't want to eliminate the ability for the writer to be involved. I almost feel I have to only do so much, or the writer doesn't really have an opportunity to contribute, right?
Yeah.
I'll eventually get to the point where you don't need the writer, and that wasn't the intent. I believe that I believe a writer is an artist. And I believe that journalism and writing and copy editing, those are specialties, and they're sensitive to the emotion, if you will, of the business, right? Storytelling can't be done by AI. A lot of the stuff that you want, you need a writer for. And I personally think that the writer is a very strong contributor to the whole business, everything in the business. And at that level, um, I think we're dealing with. Uh, I think it's a fallacy to assume that AI will ever understand the personality of your company. And why should you care? If I can make your writers uh, more efficient and more comprehensive and give them a brief to work from, and if I can present that and save you hours of time per article, you don't need to dump your writers. They're going to be able to either produce twice as much or be able to do things that are much more efficient and better and higher quality, because quality is what counts.
Yeah.
And I think that this is an empowering tool.
So your company, your agency has a team of writers that work on copy for your clients, right?
Correct.
How many writers do you have?
Right now it's 4 or 5.
Okay.
Um, not a, Again, we're focused on SEO, but we have 4 or 5 writers. But a writer can write lots, a lot. And especially if you're, instead of 4 hours per page, you're doing it in 2 or less.
Hmm.
Writers can write. And we use the tool ourselves. Now, there's a couple of things we've tied into our services for our clients. For instance, we have the ability to take a page that's generic, it's about your product, and create hundreds of localized pages by city. And this is not a wildcard replace, it's a rewrite, because AI rewrites. It doesn't wildcard replace anything.
Yeah.
And it understands that Chicago is the windy city. And it understands it has attractions and Navy Pier and the Cubs. And it has all these things that is unique to Chicago and New York and Atlanta and Florida and Miami and all these states or regions. Um, and it actually personalizes to that city, but ties it in tightly to the theme of that original page, right? it isn't just a travel log of Chicago. It's relative to that theme. How does it work? Um, an example is we did an article about water damage, and when it wrote about Cleveland, it talked about a lot of the water damage because of flat roofs and things called ice dams. And an ice dam comes because the sun is blocked by the roof edge, and the snow doesn't melt at the edge, but it melts in the middle, and ponds form, and then they soak through your roof, and you have water damage, right? And but when it wrote for Miami, that didn't happen, and it knew that the climate contributed to the damage, and it was writing about the damage just happened to be in that city. So AI is capable of doing so many more things than a mail merge or a wildcard replace type mechanism. And Google previously has said that for SEO, if you're doing a wildcard replace, it's spam. But if it's a rewrite, it works. And so we've done it, and we created for a client over 900 pages. And we're still testing because they're going up live now, but over half of them are first page. So, it works well, and Google accepts it, and that's something you can do because of AI, right? Now, we still had a writer read it and make sure it was safe and sane because we don't know if it's going to make up weather. We can't, sometimes AI does something called hallucinating, right? It imagines things. Um,
Well, just a euphemism for a blatant lie. Yeah.
yeah. So, and that's another reason, by the way, that you have to have a writer or at least a copy editor go through this stuff, because even if I wanted to create an article that was finished, ready to publish, if I publish false information, it's a problem. I think a lot of people have read how people have, the way to make certain recipes is to include rocks. I mean, what? I mean, it's you don't do that, or it may have a quantity of the ingredient wrong, or even a wrong ingredient. I mean, it sometimes gets it wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and um, you definitely need a sanity checks on AI. But if you're writing for the writer, you've built in your sanity check, right? The writer has to read it and say what, and fix it, and um, and sometimes it's hard to detect. I wrote one that said, "Go source a quote talking about this from a book, cite the author, the book number, and the ISBN number." And it went and it did it. And Jane Doe wrote a wonderful book with ISBN number 0123456789. But it was presented in a way, the formatting of it was presented in a way, if you didn't really have a writer look at it, you might publish that.
Yeah.
Total fiction.
Yeah, you do. You need to fact check the stuff before it gets published for sure, at a minimum. But you mentioned humanizing. You mentioned earlier AI detection. I'm guessing that you have those capabilities built in to your PreWriter product, right?
Yes.
Okay. What if somebody is not a customer of PreWriter? What would you recommend that they use as an AI detector? Because there are a bunch of them out there, such as GPT-0. Which one would you recommend for them to use as a humanizer if they're not a paying customer of PreWriter?
So We're about 90% done with our testing of 10 humanizers. There's
Hmm.
two levels to humanization. There is the detector and the writer. And there's tools out there that claim that you can give it a document, it will rewrite it, if you will, in a form that when you run it through the detector, it's 100% human. Um, those are dangerous. We've used undetectable and all sorts of those tools, and um, a great many of them, they'll work well, like this kind of an article, but they totally are terrible on a different kind of article. Um, the more technical the article, the worse they are. If it's an easy, blog fix about the local, you know, something, school board or something, that's a little bit easier for them to rewrite. However, the part that's really strange is taking an article from any of the writers, including straight out of our system, and you can run it on any one of 5 detectors. Um, Zero GPT or GPT Zero or free or any of these detectors, they'll all be different. This one will say 90% human, and this one will say 10% human on the same article. So I think that there's a lot of room for improvement. And um, so what we do is we run several, not just one. And because we're under program control, anything with an API we can interface with. And and again, remember, Grammarly actually detracts from human because it makes it much more perfect. Um, I don't want to pass 100% human by installing errors. That's not necessarily the right way to do it.
Right.
I think you have to have content that is readable, and as long as it is readable, uh, I think a very big thing is we have this self-learning process in our process, and we sort it by what is the right learning sequence within a page. And I think if you can do those correctly, that's like 20 times better than anything else out there. You still have to try to make it human. Don't get me wrong, you still want it to be more human. Um, some of the tools that are really cool is you paste in your page, you run the tool, it'll tell you the percent human, but then underneath that, it actually shows you the content of your page and color codes the sections that need to be tweaked. Well, any writer can go through that and tweak it. That part isn't hard. That's a writer's job. So let the writer write. I never said the writer drops to zero time. I just said it's reduced significantly. So, yeah, let the writer still write. They would have had to do that anyhow. Even if they wrote it from scratch, they'd have to run it through a tool and then they'd have to fix it. Sometimes writers write something that looks AI. And think about the philosophy of it. At what point is a human plagiarizing AI output? How do we know that AI is plagiarizing humans? Maybe the human is actually plagiarizing AI. At what point can you draw the line that say it the human is always right? You could, but if I generate an article in AI and then I take what that article is and then I invent it myself. Am I plagiarizing them? Or is the LLM plagiarizing humans? Is there a copyright infringement? I mean, there's no 10 years from now, it's almost going to be undetectable as to who said it first because there's going to be so much of it. So my view is that it's going to be hard to say it's got to be human, and that as time passes, it gets harder. But in today's world, you don't want to be blatant about the fact that it's AI. I think that's the big issue.
Yeah. So you're doing an analysis now of the top humanizers, maybe by the time.
The top writers and testers.
Yeah. So what would when do you think this will come out? Because this episode that we're airing or that we're recording now will probably air in about a month.
It'll be before that.
Okay. So provide as soon as the research is finished and published, send that over and we'll include it in the show notes.
Sounds great.
Yeah. And I'm guessing like Humbot is one of the humanizers you looked at and all that.
We have a full list.
Yeah. All right, cool.
What I did was I gave it to my content team to run the experiments, and then I'll review it and go through it and question it. I've been running some of the tools myself. I will tell you that a great many of the tools are terrible. And they're good on a certain kind of article, but I've yet to find a tool that is good everywhere.
Yeah. Well, there are tools that will aggregate all the tools. Like, for example, if you want to run a prompt on, let's say, a half dozen different LLMs simultaneously, there's ChatHub, chathub.gg. I'm sure there are competitors to that, but that's one example. And I imagine there are going to be versions of ChatHub for humanizing and for AI detection and for all sorts of different use cases.
Yes. And you see, that's anticipating that will happen is why we wrote the application the way we did. We can just plug it in.
Cool. So let's talk a bit about content and how that spans the SEO and PPC sides and how to get all that to work together seamlessly and kind of with maximum efficiency.
Yeah, I think that a little bit of history would help. In the beginning, and maybe I was a little biased, in the beginning there was SEO, and down here was content, right? And everybody was talking about, well, you do on page and you get links, and content wasn't really as discussed as it is now. And because of the usability discussions, the expertise, authority, trust, experience, discussions at an AI level that's coming out of Google, we're finding that the content importance has moved up. And I believe that content is very close to the importance of SEO, to the point where you almost can't do SEO without doing content. Before, you could have just said that's up to the content team of the writer, but now we have to be involved in it as SEOs. And so I think that, first of all, there's sort of a merging, if you will, of SEO into the content process and the content into the SEO process. They're becoming somewhat symbiotic. And what we want to be able to do is be good at both, and that requires SEOs to adapt, right? We have come to our tool actually has an API interface into our SEO tools. At the time we create the content, we know that we balance out the keywords. So we're seeing that SEO and content really needs to be somewhat of a cohesive thing. You can't avoid content in SEO anymore. If you have an SEO project that is not discussing content, they don't know what they're doing. It has to be a part of it. Now, how big of a part? Well, that's a reasonably important question. I think on the last show, you and I discussed that process I invented for FAQs at the bottom of the page. If you go to one of our blogs, in the jump links at the top, there's an FAQ entry. If you go down to that FAQ and search for that question, generally, our site shows up on the first page for the question, and not in quotes, just generically search the question. And we have put those on thousands of pages on my website. And what happens is when you do that search, that FAQ, just using that as an example, will rank in Google, typically page 1. Often it's in the AIO. Or it has the featured snippet.
Yeah. AIO is AI overview, because not everybody is an SEO
It's
geek.
AIO. That's EIEIO. AIO is the AI overview section that is produced by Google at the top of certain queries, typically how queries. Perhaps a what would give you a featured snippet and a how would give you a little explanation. It's the Google AI response, if you will. It's very much like sort of the Genesis approach. It puts it into the top of the Google search result page. So if you have a how question, it shows up. Originally, Google put it in a lot of pages, and then they backed it off because it was inappropriate content. It was wrong. It hallucinated. But now it gives you, on the left side of the top of the page, it gives you an article, and on the right side, it tells you where the sources were. So many times, what we have to do is, from an SEO point of view, we want to include that FAQ, because if I answer 1,000 questions on my topic within my website, Google's going to think I'm the expert. Just that simple. My rankings overall have gone up at least 50% since I put those in place. So, and all of these here's the cool part. All of the updates that Google's doing, and the core updates, they did one in August. It's still going. There's still a ripple effect of it right now. Our rankings for page 1 have been totally flat or up, but we didn't get a hit from any of the updates. So I think being identified as a subject matter expert by answering questions as often as you can is a big thing. That's one of the things PreWriter does. It generates the answer to those questions in a format that you could just have the writer finish and then add to the bottom of the page. And I also think that that's an easier thing. See, a lot of people don't want to rewrite their pages, but they do want to freshen their page. So adding a big block of FAQ content to the bottom of the page is really beneficial. It works out extremely well. And in fact, I have so many pages with those questions. One of the things I also discovered is I'm typically spidered within 48 hours or so. So if you go to my blog page, the one I published 2 days ago may not be spidered yet, but the one I published 4 days ago will be spidered, and you can see how well it ranks. So the spider frequency goes up. The subject matter expert signal goes up. You're answering questions that users are increasingly asking. One of the byproducts of chat, and this is pretty much a byproduct, is that you learn to ask questions when you're dealing with chat. Well, it turns out that the number of people asking questions at google.com is now approaching 20%, and it wasn't there before. So people are actually learning that they don't have to put in a keyword, they can put in a whole question.
Yeah, they're being trained by AI prompting.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you're exactly right. And the advantage of the AI prompting is you could actually ask strings of questions. Like, give me the top 10 of this, and then tell me which ones are in this state, and then list the company name and phone number. You try doing that at Google, right? I mean, but you can do that at chat and get the answer. I use chat for all. By the way, AI is not just for content. I I know everybody is probably like me in one way or another. I write things if and I've learned to put it down and come back to it an hour later. And then when I read it, I ask myself, who wrote that? Right? And then I end up rewriting it. Um, well, now I'll write it and I'll say to chat, make it conversational but more professional. Um, and it'll rewrite it for me. And many times I find that what it wrote, I couldn't touch. I could never get it that good. And that becomes my email. Um, there's so many things that are happening. I have created an avatar. Now, to create an avatar on myself, I have the advantage that I have, you know, 15 hours of Bruce giving training classes because I have an online training course. So I got all this Bruce speaking, and you run it through special software, and it builds an avatar. And then you give it a written page, and suddenly, by merging it in, that avatar is speaking those words. I could be doing training for the next 300 years using that. My avatar says what I say. And we are implementing that in our video training course only because Google is changing things so fast. I can't green screen whole sections of the course over and over and over and over, but I can rewrite the script, and it's suddenly you've got the slides, you've got me speaking the script that I approved, and you see me talking in the lower right hand corner. For a video course, that's sufficient. And I think we're going to find that ads are going to do a lot more of those. I think we're going to find that I could right now, and by the way, this is one of our other tools. We could create from any keyword a list of 100 derivatives, and for each of the 100, we can generate a 500 word script, and I can generate 100 videos like overnight with me reading the script that corresponds to that keyword. That's a lot of AI.
Yeah.
And I could do it in different languages. I can tell it right now. I want it in Japanese. I get it in Japanese.
Yeah. Are you using HeyGen or some other tool?
Yes.
HeyGen? Okay.
That's the one I'm using.
Yeah, it's pretty like amazing. I think it's already out of the uncanny valley. It's quite spectacular. What's one of your favorite blog posts that has the FAQs in it that you think would be a great example to include in the show notes?
Okay, almost any of them. Any other? Well, the ones on SEO classes, it shows up very well because I mean it's one of our products.
So in-person SEO classes versus online SEO training, the differences. So that one has an FAQ at the bottom. How can I decide between in-person SEO training and online SEO training courses?
Right. So what you do is you just highlight the question, right click on it, do the Google search, and it generally or usually shows up with an AIO at the top of the page, but we're usually right there with the featured snippet or near the top.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know we're getting close to time, so I wanted to maybe switch to kind of a lightning round mode.
Sure.
All right. Let's talk for a minute about silos, and then I've got some questions about other things. But yeah, you used to really talk a lot about silos as an SEO thing. And I'm just curious, has your feeling about silos changed or moved on? Because I don't normally hear you talking about it these days.
It turns out that when I was talking about it, part of it was a part of a USP, right? A unique sales proposition or service. And um, now everybody's doing it. Um, it people refer to when people get on board with things, they like to rename it. Now it's called clustering, or which is a subsilo. It's a section of a website siloed. We still do siloing. I have right now two active large projects that are siloed. So yes, we still do it. We still talk about it. It turns out that it still generates 30 to 300% organic traffic increase. It's still really powerful because it's designed to help you be a subject matter expert. So we still do a lot of siloing projects. Um, it isn't the kind of thing to talk about necessarily at a conference because for so long, I've talked about it and others are talking about it. Um, but it is something we invented in 2002. Um, it was interesting back then when I talked about it, people would look at me like I'm crazy. Now, when I talk about it, it's like, yeah, that's obvious. So it's lost a little bit of its
Luster?
luster.
Yeah.
It isn't as unique as it once was,
Yeah.
but it certainly is still as powerful, and we still do a lot of projects for it.
Yeah. I do hear the term clustering or clusters a lot. Yeah.
What that is, it's really a sub-silo. Siloing typically is a site architecture hierarchically structured from the top. What a cluster is a little part of your directories, a little area that is siloed all by itself. But it isn't a whole silo. So it's a cluster within it. If you did enough clusters, you will logically have siloed. But silo is a superset to clusters.
All right. Now, before we started recording, one of the things you said is that you don't do verticals. Let's elaborate a bit on that for our listeners, since they weren't privy to the pre-recorded the pre-interview discussion. Why don't you do verticals, and what do you do instead?
Okay, yeah, uh, it's almost interesting. Maybe sometime we should actually record our pre-recording,
Yeah.
just as you know, an add-on. Um, a vertical would be a company that does only car websites, or only hotels, or only lawyers, or only something that uh, limits that, in theory, uh, broadens their ability to get rankings because they're experts in only one thing. That's all I do is car sites. I know car sites. It turns out, though, um, and I've always felt this way, that's sort of putting all your eggs in one basket. There's a lot of sites that got wiped out during COVID because that's what they did. But more importantly, I think that the technology within Google at 12 changes a day, it is far more important to be an SEO than a subject matter expert because that's the customer's job. They are the subject matter expert. I don't have to tell them how to do their job. Inherently, they're going to perform well, right? So I believe that what we're dealing with is that a client of ours that is a lawyer, and we have lawyers, or a client of ours that is a franchise owner, and we do large franchises, all the neighborlies. I mean, we do a lot of franchise work. We have a lot of people that are in autos, no doubt, but we're not going to just be that auto. We are part of the team with the client, and they are far more of an expert than we will ever be. Think about it this way. Is Google ever going to be an expert on everything in the index? But they're an expert on search.
Yeah.
And I chose to focus more on the needs for in-depth SEO knowledge than industry knowledge outside of SEO. I can't pretend to be a car expert as well as the car people, but I can be an SEO expert because that's what I do for a living. And so I chose a long time ago that specific verticals are not a focus. It doesn't mean I can't do them because I have the SEO knowledge, but specific verticals, it's a partnership with the client. They have the knowledge, I have the SEO knowledge. Together, we get rankings.
Yeah.
Just the way it works.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. What's happening these days in local search, local SEO?
Okay, so we understand, by the way, local SEO has not necessarily changed dramatically. However, what levers you pull, that part hasn't changed dramatically, but what has changed is how you do it, right? So you could say it's the same as before. I wrote an article about 46 things that influence local SEO. Those 46 things are still true. It's just how do you get client testimonials? Or how do you manage your Google business profile? Or how do you get a broader map coverage? Or those are the kinds of things that you focus on in local now. As I mentioned, we do a lot of franchise work. And those franchise stores really want to rank in their regions. But there's only so many keywords. Where we're able to get them ranked is organic. That's the SEO component. We can get them into the Google business profile and the local service ads, and we can get them mentioned more. We can do those kinds of things from an organic SEO point of view. And but those things for 5 years ago to now, even if they're the same things, are different. How you do it changed. How many competitors do you have? You say, for instance, one of the things that's more important now, it used to be that everybody focused on how do you get a particular ranking. Now it's more share of voice, different metrics. And yeah, we have a whole slew of custom reports that we wrote just to allow us to view inside of local rankings and be able to present those for our clients. It's not that different. Anything you do nationally, you would want to do locally. But local also has a lot of focus on Google business profiles and local testimonials and how you write the content for local search. That is different from national, but SEO is SEO, still the same.
Awesome. Well, we're out of time, so why don't you share your website and any particular social platforms you want to send our listener or viewer to learn more and work with you potentially in your team?
All right, my website is bruceclay.com. The PreWriter website is PreWriter.ai. And by the way, you can go there. You can sign up, no credit card. You get 20 free tokens to try the tool. Just go try it. No obligation. Just try it because you'll love it. We have SEOtraining.com, which is our training site. We have SEOtools.com, which is our tools site. But most of our services are offered through bruceclay.com. And it's pretty good. Pretty good. We do webinars. We do all sorts of things. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, because that's where I spend most of my personal time, follow me on LinkedIn, Bruce Clay. And when I have a new blog post, I post it, and etc. It's an announcement comment site. So it works out well if you want to reach out. You can always follow Bruce Clay Inc. on most of the other social media platforms. I'm around.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Bruce. And thank you, listener. We'll catch you on the next episode. This is your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.